Hello and welcome to another Doctor's Assistant 1 video, and today I'm doing a review of Doctor Who Spearhead from Space. This is of the special edition release, so it's got better artwork than that on the DVD cover. So you've got, the Auton, John Pertwee's third Doctor, Liz Shaw, Auton's the Spearhead spear thing. Pardon me, the Brigadier Channing or whatever, PG, the John Pertwee years, 1970 even to 1974. BBC logo there, as well as DVD. Similar sort of information on the spine, really. Then on the back you've got the strip of screenshots from the episode, as well as a bio, as well as the special features list. On the inside you've got the disc, which has similar disc art as the cover, as well as having writer's notes and that, and a cast list and that. So what did I think of Doctor Who Spearhead from Space? I think it's a decent enough start to what is arguably considered as like the sort of golden age of Doctor Who for a lot of fans, myself included, the sort of 1970s era, John Pertwee and Tom Baker's era. However, I've always found, although this one is a 4-part story, I don't know why, but the pacing of it, I always feel like it's quite long-winded. I prefer Terror of the Autons myself personally. I think, the nesting consciousness in this episode could have been sort of implemented and, both shown off a bit earlier in the story and also be implemented a bit better and more effectively. I think Channing as a character is quite creepy and sinister, but other than that, I honestly think the Master is probably a better character, obviously, to have alongside with the Autons. However, I also do feel like a drawback of the Autons is that, and even the nesting consciousness, is that you have to have like a sort of go-between between the the nesting consciousness and the Autons, and them both. You need like a middleman between them and the Doctor and the companion and unit in this case. And as I say, I think it works better when it's, say, someone like the Master or something, as opposed to this non-real sort of threatening. Well, he is eerie and he is kind of weird, Channing, but I mean, he just doesn't have what Roger Delgado has, really, obviously, and it's just a bit of a shame, really. I think John Pertwee is excellent in this episode, and considering that as an actor behind the scenes, supposedly he was quite nervous about taking on the role, and not really feeling 110% sure how to play the part, and that it really doesn't show on screen in so much as he just seems like he's just sort of, just knows how to play the part, and he seems quite sort of stern, authoritative, and, sort of headstrong, really, as a character, from the off, early on, all he really sort of says is, "Shoes, where are my shoes?" sort of thing, and that, which I thought was funny. He also sets up the trend of the Doctor stealing his costume and or clothing from, moreover, his clothing from a hospital, which I quite like, because if you recall, that recurs or crops back up in the 1996 TV movie, as well as the 11th Hour, Matt Smith's first outing. So yeah, the Autons are really good sort of baddies and iconic villains. The iconic scene of them, like, coming to life and destroying everything in their wake in the streets, when they come alive and smash the windows and that. I do like how, I think in the new series, if I'm not mistaken, in Rose, you do actually see the glass smash, whereas here it always cuts away from that for whatever reason. I just think it's a bit more impactful that we do see the smashed glass and that. However, I know a lot of classic Who fans will argue that this is the better story of the two, because this one has a lot more violence and a lot more actual, people dying and that, whereas in the new series it obviously cuts away from the violence and that. But yeah, Yeah, I think the Autons are decent enough. Again, I even think the sort of shopping window scene, or the dummies coming out of the shop windows, could have been done a bit sooner in the episode. I think, although it is a four-part story, I think what my primary sort of major criticism of this story would probably be the fact that pacing wise, I honestly feel like it's quite a slow story, in all honesty, which is odd because the music's pretty decent and that and Liz Shaw as or Caroline John as Liz Shaw, she's good in this. Nicholas Courtney as the Brigadier, he's great. They work, or they sort of butt heads, because Liz Shaw's a scientist and obviously the Brigadier's head of unit and that, and they butt heads, but either way they work well together, and that in the scenes and that. It's just, as I say, I just feel like this story sort of, part 2 and 3 are probably my least favourite parts. Part 1 and part 4 are probably the most interesting, and yet really part 1 and part 4, I'd probably say they're the most interesting because one, you get to see the Nestine in part 4 and that, and then you also, in part 1, you get that sort of epic sort of chase scene thing of the Doctor escaping in the wheelchair, but also the fact that it's the Doctor trying to get over this sort of fact that he's a new person and that. And I like the scene of him getting the costume and that, and it just feels right, that is just the iconic sort of third Doctor, 1970s sort of frilly shirt and, the cape and that, and, you know that that's the third Doctor, and it's really interesting how in certain scenes, before he even says anything to that one guard, that he gives a load of lip to, there's a bit where he opens a door and it just pans to John Pertwee's face, and it's just I swear to God, when I see that, I'm just that is the third Doctor. He doesn't even have to say anything. You already know that is the perfect and definitive person who they could have got to be Patrick Troughton's successor, really, and that, I think. It's cool that they have these sort of this mystery with the meteorites and that and I like how they sort of space that out and that, with the fact that some of them are broken and the Doctor and Liz are trying to figure out that, and then also you do finally find some that are completely complete and are making noises and then light up and that. I also love the introduction to the idea of them doing duplications of people as well, which is a thing that gets brought back into Series 5 with Auton duplicates, Roman soldiers, so it is a good enough idea there. They are clearly a good enough baddie and or villain because they come back obviously in the next series to open Series 8, as well as obviously the new series, and as I just mentioned in Series 5 finale, they're in that. So they are quite an integral, well, I don't know if I'd go so far to say integral Doctor Who bad guy, but they are quite iconic and quite memorable in that, and that, I don't know if there's a lot you can do with the Nestine and the Autons moreover, but yeah, as I say, I just feel like the story sort of drags and that it's not bad by any means. It's not a bad story. It's kind of odd because I do prefer Liz Shaw as a companion as opposed to Jo Grant personally, but honestly, as I said before, I do think Terror of the Autons, personally for me, is the better story of the two. I've always preferred Terror of the Autons as opposed to Spearhead from Space myself, but I don't think this is a bad episode, and I'm going to give it a well-earned 7 out of 10. I don't think it's the best story ever, and I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for that. I do think it's a good introduction to the Third Doctor, and it does push the overall show into a new direction. I love the title sequence. It's really cool. It's really sort of psychedelic and really cool to see Doctor Who title sequences in colour for the first time. And that, however, if I'm not mistaken, although colour TV was a thing in the 1970s. For most households, it was still so expensive that it wasn't until almost sort of the Tom Baker era, if not maybe the latter end of John Pertwee's era, sort of early sort of series 12, season 12, 13, maybe even 14, until loads of people got, you know, colour TV. So although, you know, the John Pertwee title sequence and this episode were technically the first episodes to be in colour, or broadcast in colour back in the day, for most people watching it originally, it was probably still aired for them, or they were still probably consuming it in black and white. So, yeah, and as well, they introduced the whole element of, like, the Doctor being earthbound and that, and the fact that he does, you know, try and trick Liz to getting into the TARDIS and, and trying to take off, but there's the dematerialization circuit sort of thing has been changed, and so the Doctor can't escape and that, and, you know, you get this sort of idea that going forward, he will have to work with UNIT quite a bit, and that whether or not he likes that or not is another thing, but either way, he has no real choice in the matter. So yeah, I would give this, as I said before, a 7 out of 10. It's not the worst episode, it's not the best episode ever, but it's not the worst either. So yeah, thanks for watching, comment, rate and subscribe.